Okay, I guess we are ready to start. אז שלום לכולם, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining. My name is Patricia Leahy Engel. I lead Intuit for Startups. I will be speaking in English as we have guests from the US, and we Israelis are known for our politeness. So I would like to stand up to our reputation. We are here to learn everything about QuickBooks integration. This is a wonderful opportunity, especially these days for startups which target SMBs. And before we start, I will maybe some housekeeping rules. This is a webinar, meaning we see you, we don't see you, you see us. And after the presentation, we will open the session for Q&As. So those of you who want to send questions, feel free to do it during the presentation, and I will relay them to the panelists after the presentation. If some of you want to speak up and ask questions directly, we will be able to do so as well. So this webinar is hosted by Intuit for Startups. Few words about us. We connect between Intuit and the dynamic startup ecosystem here in Israel. Our purpose is to create value for both sides and opportunities for partnerships, investments, and M&As. I invite you to be in touch. We have events, office hours, and other pathways for engagement. Don't be a stranger. Visit our website. I will be sending you the link in chat and get in touch. So our agenda for today, first, we will hear from Gilad about Intuit and about QuickBooks. Gilad Uzieli is Director of Product Management for B2B Payments at Intuit. Normally, maybe Gilad, I don't know if we see you, maybe you say, hey, hello, but we will hear from you soon anyway.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi. Normally, Gilad is based in Tel Aviv, where Intuit has a strategic R&D site with over 450 employees. But today he accepted to join us from Mountain View, California. After Gilad, we will hear from Robert. Hello, Robert, about developing on the Intuit platform. Robert Mings is a solutions architect. He's part of Intuit Developer Group. So he's the guy we all want to hear from. And then last but not least, we will hear firsthand from a company who cracked it right, and that's Mesh Payments, with Noa Benvenisti, who is VP of Product Management at Mesh Payments. Hello, Noa.
Hi.
And now we would like, hello. I would like to hand over the presentation to Gilad.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening. All right, so in the next few minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about Intuit and what are we doing. So our mission is very, very inspiring. We are practically a financial global platform, and we're inspiring to power prosperity around the world. And let's talk about how do we actually do that. So our strategy is actually to solve major problems, major challenges for anyone who is a consumer to small business and anything in between. There's a big gray line around that. So also self-employed are in that group, and there are hundreds of consumers and small businesses that we're already hundreds of millions that we're already helping. How are we doing that? What are we actually trying? Wait, go back one slide. How we do that? And what are we actually doing? We're trying to help these users actually end the day with more money in their pockets by doing actually less work on all these things that some of them don't really want to do. They want to focus on their lives. They want to focus on their day-to-day business. They don't want to deal with some of the challenges we're trying to solve for them. And in complete confidence that they're doing the right choices and right actions. On the platform, we're actually dealing with a lot of, we're actually dealing with a lot of different type of ecosystem players, right? Anything from accountants to developers like yourself. This is part of the open ecosystem that we're driving, and now we're making it more and more AI-driven, which is a process we started over 5 years ago already. On the next slide, we're going to talk about what actually are the jobs to be done we're trying to solve. And this is the list of top jobs to be done we're helping our customers solve. On the consumer side, it could be things like how do you get more tax refund at the end of the year, a very US centric challenge, to businesses that are trying to expand their business, make their payments either to other vendors or to the employees as a payroll, or actually get paid from their customers. So these are the top things, top 6, 7 things we're trying to solve for each of our users on our platforms. The platforms that we're actually managing on the next slide are basically 4 major home brand at every house in the US. It's QuickBooks for businesses, and MailChimp for businesses is a marketing platform. This is on the business side, and TurboTax and Credit Karma for the consumer side of things. All are very huge brands in the US and globally. And on the last slide, I'm going to talk about exactly how we do it. So the way we're solving these things is actually with a huge capabilities platform, solving all these small issues that our customers are facing. We actually have over 100 million customers on our platform today, 90 million on the consumer side, more than 10 million customers on the QuickBooks small business platform. We're actually today driving 300 billion in payroll, over 1.6 trillion total volume of invoices are being sent every year, and our consumers some of them are getting the largest checks of the year through our platform as part of TurboTax, and over $100 billion are being paid over there once a year. So this is in a nutshell the scale and size of Intuit's platform. Handing it over back to you guys.
Thank you,
Hi,
Gilad.
Robert.
Welcome. That's me, I believe.
The stage is
Welcome,
yours.
everyone. once again. So you kind of heard from Gilad about Intuit and a little bit about the why. Now we're going to talk specifics about our developer platform, which is one of those capabilities that Gilad alluded to earlier. So rather than start with an agenda for this section, I'd like to start with a promise. And the promise is this. By the end of today's session, you'll have a fundamental understanding not only of the APIs that we offer, but also some of the other broader capabilities that we offer as well. Additionally, and this was already hinted at earlier, we hope that you realize the market opportunity. So not only by just creating an integration, but also by listing that integration on our app marketplace. Now, one of the first questions we usually get is why? Why should I develop an integration with Intuit or on the Intuit platform? And I'd like to break it down into kind of 4 main areas. The first is reach. We have over 8 million plus total active QuickBooks customers, with 5 million of those on a single core product, which is QuickBooks Online. We also offer pretty broad capabilities. We're a mature platform. We don't just have APIs. We also have things like webhooks or data queries, other things that kind of aid you on the development journey. There's also a marketing or kind of an ecosystem play here, where by creating an integration, maybe even taking a step further and listing that integration or your application on our app marketplace, it can unlock additional marketing opportunities, can unlock organic growth through, say, search engine optimization. Somehow, someone long ago was very forward-thinking, and Intuit actually owns the apps.com domain. So naturally, people will search some use case app QuickBooks Online. And of course, if you're on the app marketplace, generally you would appear pretty high in that search if they were to, say, Google it, for instance. And then finally, there's the data opportunity. Let's say your app facilitates some use case. Maybe it displays a table of data. And historically, you weren't able to perhaps slice and dice that by, say, injecting sales figures into it, or slicing it down by, top customers, for instance. Well, if you create an integration, you could potentially unlock and facilitate additional use cases that weren't otherwise possible. So those are some of the reasons. So let's say you want to develop an integration and you're wondering, okay, great. What use cases are actually facilitated? Now, what you see on screen is, of course, just an example, but these are the types of things you kind of think about. And I'll also preface by saying there's effectively a limitless number of areas of opportunity here. There's a lot of unsolved customer problems. Every day there's new applications launching with an integration on our platform, and they grow very quickly, right? Because they have really good market fit. So a lot of opportunity here. I'll just go over a couple. Of course, the bread and butter would be anything to do with accounting. So think bookkeeping, think money in and money out, accounts receivable, accounts payable. We also offer a payments API, so you could actually do payment processing for your customers, which is kind of an interesting use case as well. You can do things like reporting and analytics. Again, I briefly brought this up about the concept of data queries. You can actually query entire reports, so you could get like a profit and loss and display that in some way. Of course, everything to do with the accounting cycle, invoicing, billing, expense management, a little bit on the inventory side, and then all the supporting cast, taxes, time tracking, and so on. Now, one misconception we commonly hear is that building an integration has to mean pushing financial transactions into QBO. And while there are many integrations that will do that, they will facilitate kind of maybe a two-way data transfer, you don't have to. And in fact, there's a large segment of apps that use the integration exclusively for, say, read or query operations. So with that in mind, you can probably think of a lot of areas where you might benefit from, or your application might benefit from using financial data for something, some use case, whether it's a value add, maybe you're sprinkling that in to slice and dice something, or maybe you're doing additional analysis on top of that underlying financial data. There's a lot of ideas here. Here's one. Let's say you have an app where you need your customer to go through some sort of onboarding experience, and they need to enter some sort of financial data. What was your business's net volume last year? What was your net revenue, et cetera. Well, if you don't need to facilitate syncing data in, you could still build an integration to make that onboarding experience a lot more delightful to the end customer. So you could grab things like the company's name, you could grab things like their address, their fiscal start date, perhaps what was their total revenue for the last 2 years, and so on, and use that to pre-populate a form or an application or an onboarding experience. That is a great customer experience and one that will certainly propel your app forward. Great. So you have an idea, decided to build an integration. You might then wonder, well, what kind of coverage do you offer when it comes to APIs? Now, this isn't everything, but this is kind of a good summary of what we offer today in terms of the accounting aspect of things. Of course, on the customer and vendor side, everything you might expect. Invoices, payments, the entire sales cycle, really, even going so far as doing things like estimates. So if you, say, are an app that facilitates use cases for maybe construction companies, or anything that might make use of quotes or estimates, that's also available. On the vendor side, everything to do with bills and expense management, kind of the procurement cycle or the purchasing cycle. Again, I mentioned that we have a lot of reports, and this is a very popular area of our APIs, is pulling report level data. You don't need to just pull all invoices and all bills and do a calculation on your side in terms of net profit and loss. We actually give that to you directly in the API. So with a very simple request, you can actually get a full kind of JSON export of or XML of standard financial reports like profit and loss, or perhaps a balance sheet. Maybe you need to understand liquidity ratios really easily. Well, you can do that quite simply. Or a measure of cash flow. Again, that's just one request to get all that data. Of course, there's list-based API entities that you might want to, in fact, in most cases, you will probably want to at least pull or query a few of these. And then, of course, the supporting cast of everything you might expect. Journal entries, sales tax, multi-currency and foreign exchange, even going so far as time activities, or uploading or downloading documents and attaching them to transactions like invoices or expenses. Now, we don't just offer a accounting API. We also offer some additional APIs. One of them is payments. So this allows you to actually process payments on our Rails if you would like to. It can be a great customer experience if you, say, have an integration that, say, syncs financial data, but also allows QuickBooks customers who have merchant accounts to process payments directly in your application. That's of course, an option too. We also have a time API where you can programmatically add time entries and manage timesheets, time off. There's a couple of cool capabilities there like geofencing and some custom fields you can slice and dice different reports with. And then I've also added this section on the future. It's a very exciting time at Intuit. There's a lot of eyes on APIs and external development. So stay tuned. Definitely keep an eye on our developer blog, which is just developer.intuit.com. There's a blog area there. And sign up for updates or email notifications if you haven't already. We expect a lot of great things to come in the next few months. Cool. So we've talked about APIs. And I also said that we aren't just a platform of APIs. We're also a platform of kind of additional capabilities. And here are some of those. The first is webhooks. This is a way to, of course, do more of an event-driven architecture. So this allows you to listen to specific events, and then we'll send you an automatic signal for a given event. You process that event and then choose what you want to do with that. Maybe it's updating an entry or a record on your side, or maybe it's creating something on your side in the case of a creation event. We also offer queries, and this is a bit unique. This allows you to use, I guess, what you might say SQL-like or SQL-lite syntax for data exploration. Again, you don't need to just send 100 requests, one after the other, to just read individual objects. You can actually do this in a SQL-like syntax. So select X fields from invoices that are active or over a certain threshold. It follows a very similar syntax that you're probably used to. There's also batch operations. So this allows you to combine or batch together up to 30 individual payloads in one server round trip. This can be really nice for scalability. Also onboarding, if you just need to query a lot of different endpoints, you could do that all at once. And you only have to process one response. Also can sometimes save on cloud infrastructure. If you are priced on a per request basis, this can help you because in essence, you're kind of sending one request. And then finally, there's this capability called change data capture, or CDC for short. If we think about webhooks in terms of event-driven architecture, CDC is kind of the opposite. It's the polling-based architecture. So you can pull this endpoint and effectively get any changes or any updates or creation that might have changed for certain entities that you request or that you put in the request. Like, again, bills or expenses. You can selectively choose what you want to actually get back. Great. So let's talk about the journey now. You've kind of heard the pitch. You've heard what the platform offers. What does the journey look like to create an integration? There's a few primary steps, and then there are some optional steps. It, of course, starts with a little bit of literature review. Can't really get away from that in today's day and age. So highly recommend just reading the docs. There's a lot of great articles and resources, which we'll talk about shortly here, that go into how you might think about developing an integration, some kind of templates on how you might do this for certain use cases. There's a lot of great content there. Definitely kind of the first place to go. Shortly thereafter, highly recommend creating a developer account. So again, it's just developer.intuit.com. You can create a developer account, and then you can create a team optionally. This allows you to bring all of your colleagues together under kind of one roof, and they will have access, depending on the permission level, to your app configurations, which is really excellent in the case of teams get changed around or there's any personnel changes. You can always be ensured that you will have access to your configurations. Now that you have an account, you have a team, you have read a little bit of the docs, you'll want to start by creating an app. And an app on our platform, again, you kind of think of it as a configuration. It's where you might enter things like redirect URIs, or you might tell us there might be a questionnaire, or you might want to list on our app store. That's where you would configure all of that. Once you have the app, you will unlock kind of immediately what we would refer to as the sandbox environment and the API keys for that sandbox environment. And with that in hand, you can start going down actually doing some coding. So you can start by implementing OAuth. That's generally where we recommend, because everything is, of course, a restricted resource. So you want to have an authorization mechanism in play there. We exclusively use OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. Optionally, you could implement OpenID Connect. Again, it will definitely increase your kind of customer experience. And we'll talk a little bit about how that might work when we talk about integration patterns, but it effectively allows you to do things like single sign-on. Now that you have OAuth in place, you could test the flow. You could actually go through and see what that handshake looks like. And with the handshake completed, you'll receive bearer tokens or access tokens. And with those in hand, you can call our APIs. And you can test that kind of firsthand. Now, optionally, last slide we talked about platform capabilities. You can kind of augment your integration with different capabilities. Maybe you want to make it a little more agile and always make sure that it's up to date. So maybe you implement webhooks. That's always a good starting point, but that certainly is optional. So let's talk a little bit about integration patterns. So the previous slide talked about the journey, but now we need to figure out, okay, how do users actually discover my integration? How do users actually trigger this integration? And there's a few different patterns. And I'll also say these are not mutually exclusive. You could technically have all three of these in your application, as they kind of can facilitate different things, but they also can act in harmony. So the first and generally the simplest, so you can kind of think about this as like kind of good, better, best. Doesn't exactly follow that way, but it's probably a good way to kind of think about this. The good is adding a Connect to QuickBooks button to your app's UI. So let's say you have an application and somewhere maybe in settings or some element you have a button that says, hey, do you use QuickBooks? Well, click here. And when they click on this button, you are going to start the OAuth handshake. And mechanically, you're going to raise an authorization request. And so they're going to go through the flow, client-side component will get launched. They'll either sign into their QuickBooks account, or if they already have an active session, they will just choose their QuickBooks account and they say, yeah, I am authorizing you to grab data. Cool. So that's kind of the easiest option. Another option you have, and again, these are not mutually exclusive, they can go hand in hand together quite well. And in this case, it's a slightly different use case, is implementing Intuit single sign-on. So this is a different button. This allows you to kind of use federated identity. So this allows you to have your customers use their same Intuit credentials for the purposes of logging into your application. So very similar, like sign in with Google or sign in with other platforms. They can use one set of credentials to sign in. On the back end, you're going to just raise an authorization request with OpenID scopes. And then the output of that is an access token, which you can call our user info endpoint. And that will allow you to grab profile attributes like first name, last name, email address, and so on, and then use those profile attributes to provision an identity on your side, kind of obfuscating the kind of onboarding experience for your user. So really delightful. If you do choose to implement that, it's generally an area of very good customer feedback. And then finally, you have your integration. You've done one or both of these integration patterns. Now it's actually time to get more visibility onto your app and your integration. It's time to kind of market it. This is where the App Store comes in. Sometimes also referred to as the App Marketplace, but it's, again, really easy to remember, just apps.com. And this is where both customers and I would also say potential customers go to discover apps, go to explore apps, go to understand what's available in the market today. And again, there's a lot of natural language that might lead a user or a customer to the App Store. Like they might go to Google and say, well, I need to an auditing app for QBO. Potentially, if you have the right keywords, you might appear as the first search there. So it's a really great. Definitely have a look. Again, really easy to remember. Apps.com. Go check it out, and you can kind of see what a normal listing might look like there. So speaking of the App Store and the App Marketplace, what does that journey look like? Because what we talked about earlier is to create an integration. Now you can take it a step further by actually listing on the App Store. Here's what that looks like. Once again, a little bit of reading. There's just a few requirements that, you need to be on side of, mainly around things like data security, data privacy, and the few technical and marketing requirements. So just have a review of that. There's a couple guides on our developer portal that talk about that. Again, optionally, you could have Intuit SSO implemented. This is kind of a discussion in its own, so I won't go into crazy detail here, but this allows your potential customers to access your application easily. So they get a slightly different flow if you have Intuit SSO implemented, where they are potentially launched into your app almost seamlessly within about 3 or 4 clicks, instead of having to go to your web page, read about it, sign up for an account, log in, connect their QuickBooks account. It's quite a bit more streamlined if you have that implemented. Then you need to choose what markets you would like to list your app into. So Gilad alluded to US earlier as kind of a big market, of course, was the main core market. But there are a number of other regions where QBO has its own kind of version, I guess you might say. That is Canada, Australia, and UK. And then for all other countries in the world, we also offer a global version that you can have a listing for. Or if you have good data to say, hey, I actually think my application does really well in these countries, you can create app cards directly for those countries specifically. And they will, of course, appear higher in results if the IP geolocation turns out to show a user is part of that country. Now, you also want to set up a testing environment for reviewers. Okay, so we're going to contact you during the kind of review phase, and we'll say, hey, can you give us some test credentials? We need to go in and just test everything. So you want to have that ready ahead of time. And when you do have that ready, it's time to submit. So you're going to submit it. We will contact you in a few different areas. And once all that is done, you're going to work with the team through the technical marketing security reviews. Once that is done, you will get kind of an email that says, congrats. Once you push this big scary button, you are going to be listed. And that is basically the end. And then you are listed within a few minutes. Now, another misconception we sometimes get is that developing an integration can take months and quarters. And don't get me wrong, of course, it certainly can take that long. And of course, this will be dependent on your engineering bandwidth, how much resources you have available to put towards it. But we actually find that most apps have a working proof of concept much before that, perhaps a matter of weeks, if they use the resources available to them. So if you're doing everything manually, probably will take longer than a few weeks potentially. But if you use the resources available to you, which we're going to talk about in just a sec, we find that it's considerably shorter. So just something to bear in mind in terms of timelines. Okay, resources, or I guess tools and resources. So you don't go at this alone. I think that's kind of the message to give here. There are a lot of different tooling, resources available to help you and kind of guide you along on that development journey. We're going to talk about 6 of those here today, but there are a few additional ones as well. The first is the OAuth Playground. Now, if you don't have a ton of familiarity with OAuth 2 and kind of the concept of protected resource and you having to kind of the 3-legged model that involves the server, your app, and the customer, this is a really great way, just in a simple graphical interface, to kind of emulate that flow that you will need to develop, but again, in a graphical interface. So you can go through and just say, I want to see how this works with this one test app that I made, and it allows you to see kind of full responses. So you can see firsthand what a success should look like. So really good. Even if you're familiar, it's probably worthwhile just going in and taking a quick look. It gives you a little bit of firsthand understanding of how we go about API scopes, which is kind of just handy knowledge to have. The next is the sandbox. So the QBO sandbox, I guess you might say. Think of this as a full-fledged QuickBooks Online mock file with mock data. So it's all pre-populated. So when you go about creating an integration to QuickBooks, you don't need to worry about creating a test file and then importing a bunch of data. That's done for you. And that is there. You can connect, you can create up to 10, and you can create them in different regions as well. So this is definitely where you're going to want to test your integration once you have kind of a working POC. And then you would later promote to the production environment. Next is the API Explorer. So this is, again, going with the theme of graphical interfaces. This is a way to kind of explore APIs without having to write any code. So you can go in there and say, hey, I want to understand how expenses or purchases work. Well, everything's there, and it actually taps directly into your sandbox. You can say, show me how to create an expense for this sandbox in QuickBooks Online US. You can do that very easily by just clicking a button. It's a great way to test syntax as well, kind of the hierarchy of what we expect in the request body. Can get tricky at times, obviously, if you're working with big requests. So this is just a good way also to sometimes help troubleshoot. Next is SDKs. Now, this is a big one, of course. We offer 6 in total. 3 of them are what we would call more full-featured. That's the .NET, Java, and PHP ones. So those ones have not only methods and libraries for handling the OAuth flow, but they also have pre-baked methods for calling our APIs and calling our different endpoints, and even using some of those platform capabilities you heard me just talk about earlier as well. So these are kind of really full-featured, kind of complete packages, if you will. Additionally, we also offer kind of, I guess you could say, light SDKs for Node, Ruby, and Python. These predominantly will cover methods for the OAuth flow. So they'll give you, going through the handshake, but also refreshing the tokens. If a user disconnects, revoking the tokens, and so on. All that is handled. And in most of them, there also is just a pre-baked method for calling an API. Of course, you'll need to change that for different endpoints, but at least you get to see kind of the basic structure there. We also have Postman collections. So if you prefer to test APIs, not say with our Explorer on our portal, but rather in an API testing client, such as Postman, you can do that. There's just a download file. You can import the collection, and then you can go through it. And it actually works quite well with the OAuth 2 flow as well. It'll launch that client-side component. It'll allow you to go through kind of what your customer might experience and then see the output. And then last 2 here are sample code and sample apps. Again, SDKs cover one part. They cover some of the methods and libraries that you might use when you are developing kind of the back end. But they don't necessarily cover the front end. And that's where a sample app can come in really handy. There are sample apps available in most of the languages that you saw on the SDKs page. So this can be kind of a really great way to just get up and running super quickly. You can launch your front end. You can have the back end, which is powered by one of the SDKs. And you can see how this works firsthand. Now, obviously, there are certain considerations like security. It's not, you of course want to audit a little bit further, but this just gives you a nice way to kind of see it without having to write too much code or anything. And then finally, blogs and articles. We have a pretty healthy blog that talks about all sorts of things going from say best practices and how you might implement certain functionalities or capabilities. But it also talks about, say if there's any changes to our platform, this is a really great way to stay notified. And there's also kind of community events and other kind of areas that sometimes get articles as well. So it's a good one just to read. It will appear in the search. So if you go to our developer portal and you type in like change data capture or queries, for instance. You might, these would also appear in the search, and you can actually filter by them as well. And I believe that takes us to the end of the talk on the platform. We are now going to have a fantastic interview. Patricia, off to you.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was very clear and very comprehensive. So Noa Benvenisti is with us. Hello, Noa.
Hi, everyone.
Noa is from Mesh Payment. It's the growth company in corporate spend management and travel. Definitely an inspiration for some of the earlier stage startups that are with us today. So Noa, can you tell us briefly about Mesh and what was the initial use case which maybe triggered the integration?
Sure. So Mesh Payments is a startup company. We've been around for 5 years, but pivoted to a new product of expense management about 3 years ago. 2 years ago, we also stepped into the world of travel management, which really goes hand in hand together with expense management. And in Mesh, we believe in providing automation for finance teams as one of our primary goals. And as such, and primarily for spend management, we're adding a lot of integrations to ERP systems of our customers. And one of the first integrations that we were adding was a QBO integration. And today we have hundreds of connected customers. And so as I was listening to Robert's slides, I'm listening to this 2 years too late. But I can definitely say I do to most of the things that were presented there. I think that from the perspective and the experience, it was a great experience connecting to QBO.
Wow, thank you. So how can you tell us a little bit how difficult was it? Does it require accounting knowledge? I know some startups are working with third parties for their integrations. What would be the consideration for doing it alone versus doing it with a third party?
Okay, so I'll try to answer, and I'll start by maybe proposing a slightly different question, how easy it was and not how difficult, because really with other ERPs, my experience was that it was difficult or more challenging. However, with QBO, it was a great and a smooth experience from the perspective of once we knew what we were trying to achieve on a financial level, exploring the APIs was basically a no-brainer to a point where basically I was sitting with a single developer, and it was we had an MVP version working probably 2 weeks later. So it was really that easy. I mean, we had some of the infrastructure in place already because we had previously integrated with other ERPs, but really just to work with QuickBooks, having all that documentation available and all of the resources, it was from that perspective a great experience. To your question regarding accounting knowledge, I feel that in Mesh specifically, because we work in the area of expense management, it does require some accounting knowledge. We're pushing journals, expenses, vendor bills, working with POs. So I do feel that we need to have a good accounting knowledge in place to understand how to really book those entries correctly. But once you have the vision of what you're trying to achieve from a financial perspective, then achieving it on a technical level is easy. And also keep in mind that we're servicing probably not the long tail of consumers and very small businesses, but more of mid-market, which tend to get a little bit more complicated with the requirements and set up in QuickBooks, working in multiple geographies and so forth. So yes, it does require some accounting knowledge, but then achieving it from a technological level was, I would say, very smooth and great experience. And also with the resources of authentication, also the authentication experience that we're able to provide our customers is also great. So
So
I
you
would say
can really
that's
do
one-
it alone from what you say. No need for third parties and external companies.
Right. So I think going through a third party is probably a more strategic question for the organization, which is trying to attempt the integration with QuickBooks. I would say that for us, we did consider going through a third party as a turnkey solution to work with multiple ERPs. We had an internal discussion about this, and from a strategic point, because we're in expense management and we work with, I would say, mid-sized organizations, which tend to be very complex on their accounting requirements and setup. For us, strategically, it didn't make sense to go through a third party, but I can definitely think of cases where it does. I think this is really a more strategical question for the organization and what kind of integration they're trying to achieve, whether they go for a very robust integration, a very tight integration, or a more wide, more integrated platforms with a more basic use case. So I think it's a strategic question for the organization that is trying to connect with QuickBooks.
Very, very clear. I'd love to take questions from the audience, also to you and to Robert. Feel free to just raise your hand and I can just allow you to talk. You can also just ask a question in the Q&A and I will relay the questions to either panelists. But meanwhile, because everybody's so shy, which is also another Israeli characteristic of being very shy. First of all, please fill the feedback form. There is a QR code on the screen. And while you prepare your questions, if there are any, or you you fill the form. Another question I wanted to ask you, Noa, is maybe if there was one thing, maybe from Robert's presentation or from your knowledge today, that you wish you would have known before you started the process, what would it be?
It's a good question. I think I would probably ask one of the developers that was working on the project whether they were using all of the resources that were presented by Robert. I know that we did use some of them, not sure that we utilized all of them. But definitely seeing everything like this, like going through the vision and the different tools that are available and how to sign up on the App Store and so forth. If we had seen all of that manual and steps, I'm sure that it would have been easier for us to achieve that. But really, other than that, it was really a very smooth experience from the development perspective.
All right, thank you very much, Noa. I don't see any question. Anybody? Anybody else from the panelists wants to add something? Maybe Robert?
Well, I'll just say, hopefully today was helpful. Definitely check out developer.intuit.com. We talked a lot about resources. We talked a lot about the journey. Almost everything that we talked about is just available in terms of some article or blog post. So nice and easy to remember, developer.intuit.com. And we have a really excellent support team and ecosystem around that as well. So we're definitely here to kind of help you on the journey. So thanks for attending.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We're here also at Intuit for Startups. We're also considering maybe opening office hours sessions for startups that would need support. And so please reach out, be in touch, and we're here. Thank you very much, everybody. Good evening and good morning. Bye-bye.